HW here, and thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV. What if I told you there was a touch sensitivity control in the Kemper? HW, there's a touch sensitivity control, and you've never told us? HW, that's not true. I've been all through the controls in the Kemper, and I've never seen it. Well, it's sort of there, but it's not called touch sensitivity. Let me explain. For those of you who don't know what touch sensitivity is, touch sensitivity has to do with how dirty or clean I can make my guitar, in this case, this Sir Classic Pro, how dirty or clean I can make my guitar simply by playing harder or softer. Let me demonstrate that. Now, what's important to note here is that phenomenon of touch sensitivity, it really has to do, when players perceive touch sensitivity, they're also perceiving an amount of compression. What you may or may not have been able to hear very clearly there was that when I plucked some notes softly, the volume comes down. Now, depending on how you're watching this, we're dealing with YouTube compression, Facebook compression, so there's some evening out of the dynamics. But touch sensitivity really has to do with the amount of gain. So you need a profile that has some gain with it, that can break up, and that sounds as dirty as you want it. But you also need an amount of compression. Now here's where things get interesting in the real world. When you put a compressor in front of an amplifier, the compression of that signal, that is the taking of the high parts of the dynamic range and the low parts of the dynamic range and sort of squashing them together, compressing them into a smaller dynamic range, that actually will result in less dynamic range for your playing. Because the hard attack is being ducked, it's being compressed, and the soft attack is being boosted up, it's being gained up. So it's important to note that a compressor in front of an amplifier will actually reduce that amount of touch sensitivity. But compression is essential for that feeling, because what's happening in a tube amp when a player perceives touch sensitivity, you have some evening of the dynamics. We want to experience that when we play softly, we get a clean note, and when we play hard or attack hard, we get a dirty note. But we don't necessarily always want all of the volume difference that comes along with that, because it's not always very helpful in a mixed situation, especially live. We don't want to have a sound guy riding our fader up and down. The Kemper allows us to do something really unique that would be really difficult to achieve in the real world. In the amplifier section of the Kemper, you will actually find a compressor that comes after the amplifier but before the EQ and the cabinet. Here's why that's very, very unique, and that's very interesting. Imagine trying to compress the direct signal of an amplifier before it hits the cabinet in the real world. Because tube amps blow up if they don't have a load, you would need some sort of a load box, like an aux box or something like that. I've got an aux over there. You'd need a load box like an aux box. You'd need to take a line out, put it into a compressor, maybe an 1176 or whatever's your favorite or something, an LA2A, whatever, those are both compressors that studios really love a lot. And you would need to take that, compress the signal, then come out of that compressor and reamp it. You'd need to put it back into like a solid state, kind of clean, very high headroom, so that you don't mess with the signal, a power amp. And then you need to put that into some guitar speakers to get that compression there, or get independent control over the compression at that spot. But with the Kemper, we get that very easily. What you were hearing earlier was the Dairy Boy Half Pint X5. We're going to be using that for the remainder of the video. And what I want to show you is go up here into the amplifier section of the Kemper. hold down the soft switch, and we get these parameters here. Now this profile out of the bag is going to have the compressor set at about 1.5. You'll notice with Michael Britt, you'll notice with Tone Junkie and a bunch of other people, you're going to notice that this is a common setting. 1.5 to 2, maybe 1.2, something like that. Between 1 and 2 is very common. You'll see a lot of profiles with that. It's a very typical setting that sort of feels like how a tube amp feels. But you can actually increase this amount of compression greatly. What I'm going to do is show you a pretty extreme example of touch sensitivity with the Kemper, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to up this control to about 6, in this case 6.1. Now, what you're going to notice when I play again is I'm going to feel in the room a very even dynamic, meaning when I pluck softly, the notes are going to be about the same volume as when I play hard. And when you combine that with something like an HSS style guitar, you're going to get the clarity and lower gain of single coils combined with the increased mids of a humbucker. You're going to be able to get every range of gain possible that you can like think of. I mean, it's always going to sound like this amp. It's never going to go Fender Twin to dual rectifier, but you're going to be able to get the cleanest sounds that this amp is capable of, basically, and the dirtiest sounds that this profile is capable of with its max gain at about halfway up. So let's check that out. Here's a single coil setting, and I'm going to show you just on the single coil what you can expect by turning that control up. Check this out. Now the difference there in the dynamics were basically zero. I perceive in this room zero difference in the volume of those two sounds. But what I do perceive is a real change in the intensity of me picking and the amount of gain that comes out in the profile. Now that's just on my neck pickup of my Strat. I mean, when you combine different pickup combinations, and by the way, that was with the volume at 10. That was purely my playing dynamics. If you want to go ahead and use the volume control and other pickups on the guitar, I'm going to show you what a wide range of tones you can get from a Strat style instrument, or if you're using a Les Paul, set that neck pickup volume on 5, use the bridge on 10, you've got a flip. You've got a switch that's going to flip from clean to dirty, or just use your volume control, just use your pick attack. But I'm going to show you with the neck humbucker, with the bridge humbucker, and with maybe some in-between sounds, how clean and how dirty you can get. And you're going to hear how small the volume difference is because I've added compression to even out my dynamics after the amp, after the part of the profile that's causing all that breakup. So I have all the dynamic range in terms of gain, but I have a very evened out dynamic. Now that was me trying to demonstrate kind of more extreme examples. I'm playing very lightly, very, attacky on the guitar, and I'm going to a hot bridge pickup and then going to that number 4 position on the Strat. But you can hear the dynamic range that's possible. There's a lot of tones possible simply just by digging in a little more. You can approach it however you want. Touch sensitivity is great because it allows you to simply actually attack the note differently and get different gain out of it that way. It allows you to use your volume control, or it allows you to use different pickups on your guitar of varying outputs. And this compressor on the Kemper will actually even the actual output there. So you'll notice less difference in the output, or none, depending on how you have it. Or you could do all 3 together. Now I'll tell you as a player what I'm experiencing here. I can feel a very high amount of compression as I'm doing this, and this may be higher than you want to set your Kemper. You may really find that setting it like 3 or 4 is a great mix of compression, but also very natural feel, and you might find that at a value of 3 or 4, it may feel more like how you're used to hearing a tube amp really cranked up and really sort of performing the way you would expect. The Kemper usually gives us controls over parameters and can take the intensity of those parameters or the extent of those parameters way over the top and way past what you could do in the real world. But what's important to note here is that this is when digital technology is giving us more control over something that exists in the real world, but something that we don't get a knob to control. The compression in the power amp stage, for example, which this is most closely emulating, although it's actually something different. It's completely after the power amp. Compression there is something that we get. It's something we experience when we're playing guitars in the real world. So having this parameter really pushes the limits of what you can do with sound. If you're a fan of Josh Meyer and some of the videos that we have of Josh Meyer and the video that Josh creates on his channel, you might notice this is a parameter that he will sometimes increase, and you'll notice his amount of touch sensitivity and expressiveness on the guitar is very much possible because the amp is that way, the sound is that way, and so it can become an integral part of a person's style or playing. I really would recommend you check out some of those videos we have of Josh on the channel, and also check out Josh's YouTube, which is linked below. Hell of a player, and I really appreciate him letting us use some of his videos for the channel. There is a high amount of compression playing, and it's something you might have to get used to. As a player, I'll just say you perceive more compression. You kind of, when you dig in, expect the guitar to get louder, and it doesn't. It doesn't at this extreme setting. So you might want to back it off for that reason. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you can play around with a bunch of profiles that you're already enjoying and find that this really works great. I have been HW. Thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV, and I hope this was a helpful Kemper tip and trick for you. For more Kemper tips and tricks, if you want to check out some profiles, we have a ton of free stuff. Go ahead and check out ToneJunkieStore.com and also ProfileCrate.com. Free monthly Kemper profiles delivered to your email. There's a ton of free stuff on there, a ton of free stuff, and there's commercial paid stuff as well, of course. But there's a ton of free stuff, and nobody should feel like they have to buy anything to get great sound out of the Kemper. The Kemper is enough, and all the free resources out there are great. I've been HW. Thank you so much. HW, out.